The morning air felt heavy with anticipation as reporters and photographers gathered outside the grand gates of Kensington Palace. It was a crisp October day in 2022, and something unusual was happening. For weeks, the British press had been buzzing with whispers and rumors about Princess Catherine, the beloved wife of Prince William. She had been missing from important royal events, her bright smile absent from charity galas and public ceremonies that she never missed before. Sarah Mitchell, a royal correspondent who had been covering the royal family for 15 years, stood among the crowd of journalists. She clutched her notepad tightly, knowing that whatever was about to unfold would be significant. The palace had been unusually quiet about Catherine's whereabouts, offering only brief statements about her taking time for private family matters. But Sarah sensed there was much more to the story. Inside the palace walls, Prince William paced nervously in his private study, his phone buzzing constantly with calls from palace officials, government ministers, and concerned family members. His usually perfectly styled hair was disheveled from running his hands through it, and dark circles under his eyes revealed sleepless nights filled with worry. The future King of England looked more like a frightened husband than a royal heir. William's mind drifted back to 3 weeks earlier when everything had started to unravel. Catherine had been preparing for a routine visit to a children's hospital in Manchester. She was standing in their bedroom, trying on different outfits, when suddenly she collapsed onto the bed, gasping for air. Her hands were shaking uncontrollably, and tears streamed down her face as she struggled to breathe. William had rushed to her side, not knowing what was happening to the woman he loved more than life itself. The royal physician, Dr. Margaret Holmes, had arrived within minutes of William's panicked phone call. After examining Catherine privately, she had delivered news that shook William to his core. The princess was suffering from severe anxiety and panic attacks, brought on by years of intense public scrutiny and the overwhelming pressure of royal duties, the constant criticism in the media, the impossible standards she was expected to meet, and the fear of making mistakes that could embarrass the royal family had finally taken their toll. Catherine had always been the picture of grace and composure in public. From the moment she had married William in that fairy tale wedding watched by millions around the world, she had thrown herself into royal life with determination and joy. She visited hospitals, supported charities, attended state dinners, and always wore the perfect smile. But behind closed doors, the pressure was slowly crushing her spirit. The breaking point had come during a particularly harsh week of media coverage. Several newspapers had criticized her fashion choices, questioned her parenting decisions, and even suggested she was not fitting properly into royal life. Catherine had tried to brush off the criticism as she always did, but this time something inside her snapped. The panic attack started small, just moments of feeling overwhelmed during official engagements. But they grew stronger and more frequent until she could barely leave her private quarters without feeling like she might faint. William had watched helplessly as his vibrant, confident wife became a shadow of herself. The woman who had once laughed easily and brought joy to every room she entered now spent hours staring out windows, lost in her own thoughts. She stopped eating properly, barely slept, and flinched whenever her phone rang with another royal engagement request. The children, Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis, had begun asking why their mother seemed so sad all the time. The decision to step back from public duties had not been easy. Catherine felt like she was letting everyone down, especially William and the Queen. She worried that people would think she was weak or not suitable for royal life. But Dr. Holmes had been firm in her recommendation that Catherine needed immediate rest and professional help to recover from what was clearly a serious mental health crisis. William had spent countless hours researching anxiety and panic disorders, trying to understand what his wife was going through. He read medical journals, spoke with specialists, and learned about the physical and emotional symptoms that Catherine was experiencing. The more he learned, the more he realized how brave Catherine had been to continue her royal duties for as long as she had while battling such intense internal struggles. The palace staff had been sworn to secrecy about Catherine's condition. Only a few trusted advisors knew the real reason for her absence from public life. The official statement spoke vaguely of family time and private matters, but William knew that the truth would eventually need to come out. He could see the strain that keeping this secret was putting on Catherine, and he worried that the speculation and rumors were only making her anxiety worse. As William stood in his study that October morning, looking out at the growing crowd of reporters, he made a decision that would change everything. He picked up his phone and called Catherine, who was resting in their private quarters upstairs. His voice was gentle but determined as he spoke to her about facing the world together. They had always been a team, and he knew that hiding would not help Catherine heal or help others who might be struggling with similar battles. Catherine listened to her husband's words, feeling a mixture of fear and relief. She had been dreading the moment when she would have to face the public again, but she also knew that living in isolation was not the answer. She thought about all the letters she had received from people who looked up to her, especially young women who saw her as a role model. Maybe her struggle could help others feel less alone in their own battles with mental health. The decision was made. They would face the world together, and they would tell the truth about what Catherine had been going through. It would be unprecedented for a member of the royal family to speak so openly about mental health struggles, but they both knew it was the right thing to do. The world was about to witness a moment of raw honesty that would touch millions of hearts and change the conversation about mental health forever. Dr. Margaret Holmes walked quietly through the private corridors of Kensington Palace, her medical bag in hand and a heavy heart weighing down her steps. She had been the royal family's physician for over 20 years, but she had never encountered a situation quite like this one. Princess Catherine was sitting in the sunroom, staring blankly out the window at the perfectly manicured gardens that she once loved to walk through with her children. The transformation in Catherine over the past month had been heartbreaking to witness. The woman who had once radiated confidence and warmth now seemed fragile and distant. Her usually bright eyes were dull, and her hands trembled slightly as she held a cup of tea that had long since gone cold. She had lost weight, her clothes hanging loosely on her frame, and her famous glossy hair lacked its usual shine. William entered the room softly, not wanting to startle his wife. He had learned to move carefully around Catherine during these difficult weeks, watching for signs of panic or distress. Every sound seemed to make her jump. Every unexpected visitor or phone call sent her into a spiral of anxiety. He sat down beside her on the window seat, close enough to offer comfort, but not so close as to overwhelm her. Catherine turned to look at her husband, and for a moment he saw a flicker of the woman he had fallen in love with all those years ago at university. She managed a small smile, though it did not reach her eyes. The effort it took for her to appear normal, even for her own family, was exhausting. She felt like she was constantly wearing a mask, pretending to be okay when inside she felt like she was drowning. Dr. Holmes observed the couple quietly before speaking. She had recommended that Catherine begin seeing a specialist therapist who worked specifically with anxiety disorders, but the princess had been reluctant. The idea of talking to a stranger about her deepest fears and struggles felt overwhelming. There was also the constant worry about privacy and the possibility that her personal struggles might become public knowledge. The doctor explained gently that what Catherine was experiencing was not uncommon, especially for people in high-pressure situations. She described how the human mind and body could only handle so much stress before beginning to break down. The panic attacks were Catherine's body's way of telling her that she needed to slow down and take care of herself. It was not a sign of weakness, but rather a signal that she had been strong for too long. Without proper support, Catherine listened to the doctor's words, But part of her still felt like she was failing everyone who depended on her. She thought about all the charities that counted on her support, the events that had been canceled because of her absence, and the disappointment she imagined people must be feeling. The guilt was almost worse than the anxiety itself, creating a vicious cycle that made her feel trapped and hopeless. William could see the internal struggle playing out on his wife's face. He had watched her battle these thoughts for weeks, always putting others before herself, always worried about letting people down. He took her hand gently and reminded her of something she had once told him during their early days of marriage. She had said that being vulnerable was not the opposite of being strong, but rather the birthplace of courage and creativity and change. The conversation turned to their children, who had been asking more and more questions about why their mother seemed so sad and tired all the time. Prince George, being the oldest at 9 years old, had noticed the most changes. He had started acting out at school and had trouble sleeping, worried that something terrible was happening to his family. Princess Charlotte, always perceptive beyond her years, had begun drawing pictures of the family, where everyone looked happy except for the figure representing her mother. Little Prince Louis, still so young at 4 years old, simply knew that his mother did not play with him as much as she used to. He would bring her his favorite toys and books, trying to make her smile, not understanding why she often seemed to be somewhere far away, even when she was sitting right next to him. The children's innocent confusion and concern added another layer of pain to Catherine's already heavy burden. William had been trying to shield the children from the worst of their mother's struggles, while also being honest with them in age-appropriate ways. He explained that sometimes grown-ups go through difficult times when they feel very worried or scared, just like children sometimes do, but that it was not their fault and that their mother loved them very much. The children accepted this explanation, but William could see they were still confused and somewhat frightened. The palace staff had been incredibly supportive during this difficult time, but their discretion and loyalty came with its own pressure. Everyone was walking on eggshells, trying to create a calm and peaceful environment for Catherine, while also maintaining the appearance that everything was normal. The head housekeeper, Mrs. Anderson, had been with the family for years and had become like a grandmother figure to the children. She often found herself making excuses to visitors about why the princess was not available, her heart breaking each time she had to lie. Private Secretary James Morrison had been fielding phone calls and emails from various organizations and media outlets, all wanting to know when Princess Catherine would return to her public duties. The pressure from outside was relentless, with speculation growing stronger each day. Some media outlets had begun running stories suggesting everything from serious illness to marital problems, none of which were true, but all of which added to the stress that the entire family was feeling. Catherine had been working with Dr. Holmes on breathing exercises and relaxation techniques to help manage her panic attacks. Some days were better than others, but the unpredictability of when the anxiety might strike made it difficult for her to commit to any public engagements. She never knew if she would wake up feeling strong enough to face the world or if she would spend the day struggling to get out of bed. The turning point came during a particularly difficult evening when Catherine had experienced 3 panic attacks in the span of a few hours. William had stayed with her through each one, holding her hand and helping her focus on her breathing until the episodes passed. Afterward, as they sat together in the quiet of their bedroom, Catherine finally spoke the words that had been trapped inside her for weeks. She told William that she was tired of hiding, tired of pretending, and tired of feeling ashamed of something she could not control. She spoke about her fear that people would judge her or think she was not strong enough to be a member of the royal family. But more than anything, she expressed her worry that by staying silent, she might be missing an opportunity to help other people who were struggling with similar battles. William listened to his wife with tears in his eyes, proud of her courage even in her darkest moments. He knew that whatever decision they made together would require tremendous bravery, but he also knew that Catherine had never backed down from a challenge when it might help others. The woman he had married was still there, beneath the anxiety and fear, waiting for the right moment to emerge and show the world real strength looked like. The decision had been made late one evening as William and Catherine sat together in their private sitting room, the children finally asleep upstairs. Catherine had been having one of her better days, feeling clearer and more like herself than she had in weeks. The fire crackled softly in the fireplace, casting warm shadows across the room that had become her sanctuary during the darkest moments of her struggle. Catherine looked at her husband with a determination that William had not seen in her eyes for months. She spoke quietly but firmly about her decision to face the world and tell her story. She wanted to be honest about her battle with anxiety, not just for herself, but for all the people who might be fighting similar battles in silence. She knew it would be unprecedented for a member of the royal family to speak so openly about mental health struggles, but she felt it was the right thing to do. William felt a mixture of pride and protectiveness as he listened to his wife. He admired her courage but worried about the reaction from the public and the media. They both knew that once Catherine spoke publicly about her anxiety, there would be no going back. Every future appearance would be scrutinized, every gesture analyzed, and every moment of stress would be magnified by those watching for signs of weakness. The next morning, Catherine began working with the palace communications team to plan what would become one of the most important speeches of her life. She insisted on writing much of it herself, wanting the words to come from her heart rather than from carefully crafted royal protocols. She spent hours at her desk, writing and rewriting, trying to find the perfect balance between honesty and dignity. Palace advisor Sarah Chun had initial concerns about Catherine's plan. She worried about how the revelation might affect the monarchy's image and whether the public was ready to hear such personal details from a member of the royal family. However, as she worked with Catherine on the speech, she began to understand the power that such honesty could have. The princess was not just sharing her story, but potentially changing how people viewed mental health struggles. Catherine's personal stylist, Emma Roberts, noticed subtle changes in the princess as she prepared for the public appearance. There was a new sense of purpose in Catherine's movements, a quiet strength that had been missing during the worst of her anxiety. As they selected the outfit for the day, Catherine chose a simple but elegant blue dress that made her feel confident and comfortable. She wanted to look approachable and real, not like an untouchable royal figure. The children were told about their mother's decision in gentle, age-appropriate terms. Prince George listened seriously as his parents explained that their mother would be talking to people about feeling worried and scared sometimes. Princess Charlotte asked if this meant other children felt scared too, and Catherine assured her that many people, both children and adults, sometimes struggled with big feelings. Little Prince Louis simply hugged his mother tightly and told her she was brave. Dr. Holmes visited Catherine the day before the scheduled appearance to assess her readiness. The princess had been practicing relaxation techniques and had experienced fewer panic attacks in recent days. The doctor was cautiously optimistic, but prepared Catherine for the possibility that the stress of the public appearance might trigger her anxiety. They developed a plan for managing any symptoms that might arise during the event. The palace staff worked tirelessly to prepare for what they knew would be an extraordinary day. Security arrangements were heightened, not just for physical protection, but to ensure Catherine would have privacy and space if she needed to step away during the event. Medical personnel would be standing by, and William would remain close to his wife throughout the appearance. Media outlets around the world began receiving notifications that Princess Catherine would be making a significant public statement. The speculation was intense, with reporters trying to guess what the announcement might be about. Some suggested it could be about a new charity initiative. Others wondered if there might be news about the royal family. None suspected the deeply personal nature of what Catherine was planning to share. Catherine spent the evening before her appearance with her children, reading bedtime stories and tucking them in as she always did. The familiar routine helped calm her nerves and reminded her of what was most important in her life. Prince George asked if she was nervous about talking to so many people, and Catherine admitted that she was, but explained that sometimes being brave meant doing something even when you felt scared. Sleep did not come easily that night. Catherine lay awake thinking about all the people who might be watching the next day, wondering how her words might affect them. She thought about young women who looked up to her, mothers who struggled with similar pressures, and anyone who had ever felt overwhelmed by life's demands. The weight of responsibility felt heavy, but it was different from the crushing pressure she had felt during her worst days with anxiety. William stayed close to his wife throughout the restless night, offering quiet comfort and reassurance. He reminded her of all the good she had already done in her role as a royal, and how much more good could come from her honesty about mental health. They talked about the letters they had received from people sharing their own struggles, and how Catherine's openness might encourage others to seek help. The morning of the appearance dawned bright and clear. Catherine woke early and spent time in quiet reflection, practicing the breathing exercises Dr. Holmes had taught her. She felt nervous but also strangely peaceful, as if a weight was beginning to lift from her shoulders. The secret she had been carrying for months would soon be shared, and there was relief in that prospect. As Catherine prepared for the day, she thought about her grandmother-in-law, Queen Elizabeth, who had always embodied duty and service. Catherine wondered what the Queen would think of her decision to be so open about her struggles. She hoped that her honesty would be seen as another form of service, helping to break down barriers and reduce stigma around mental health. Emma Roberts helped Catherine with her final preparations, applying minimal makeup to let her natural beauty shine through. Catherine wanted to look polished but not perfect, real but not fragile. As she looked at herself in the mirror, she saw not just a princess or a royal figure, but a woman who had survived a difficult battle and was ready to help others do the same. The final moments before leaving for the public appearance were filled with quiet intensity. Catherine hugged each of her children extra tightly, kissed William with more tenderness than usual, and took several deep breaths to center herself. She knew that in a few hours, the world would know her secret and everything would change. But for the first time in months, she felt ready to face whatever came next. Palace staff gathered to wish Catherine well, their faces showing admiration. For her courage, Mrs. Anderson, the head housekeeper, had tears in her eyes as she told Catherine how proud she was of her bravery. The princess thanked everyone for their support during her difficult time and asked them to continue keeping her family in their thoughts and prayers. As the car pulled away from Kensington Palace, Catherine reached for William's hand and squeezed it 3 times, their secret signal for saying "I love you." William squeezed back 3 times, and Catherine smiled genuinely for the first time in weeks. Whatever happened next, they would face it together, just as they had faced everything else. In their marriage. The black car pulled up to St. Mary's Hospital in London, where crowds of people had been gathering since early morning. News vans lined the streets, their satellite dishes reaching toward the gray October sky like metal flowers seeking sunlight. Photographers pressed against the barriers that police had set up, their cameras ready to capture what many sensed would be a historic moment. Catherine sat in the back seat of the car, her hands folded carefully in her lap to hide their slight trembling. She had practiced her speech dozens of times, but now that the moment had arrived, her heart was beating so fast she worried people might be able to hear it. William reached over and placed his warm hand over hers, giving her the strength she needed to take the next step. Security officer James Thompson had been protecting the royal family for 8 years, but he had never seen a crowd quite like this one. There was an unusual energy in the air, a mixture of curiosity and genuine concern, that made the atmosphere feel different from typical royal events. People in the crowd were not just there to see celebrities or take photos. They seemed to understand that something important was about to happen. As the car door opened, a hush fell over the hundreds of people who had gathered. Catherine emerged slowly, her blue dress catching the light as she stood up straight and faced the crowd. Her posture was dignified but not stiff, confident but not untouchable. For a moment, she simply stood there, taking in the sea of faces that were all looking at her with expectation and hope. William appeared beside his wife, his presence solid and reassuring. He was dressed in a simple dark suit, his usual royal formality replaced by something more approachable and human. The couple stood together for a moment, not speaking, just being present with the crowd that had gathered to support them. The silence stretched on, but it was not uncomfortable. It felt like the whole world was holding its breath. Reporter Amanda Hayes had covered royal events for 15 years, but she had never felt the kind of anticipation that filled the air that morning. She watched as Catherine approached the small podium that had been set up, noting how the princess moved with a new kind of grace. It was not the practiced elegance of royal training, but something deeper and more authentic. Catherine reached the microphone and paused, looking out at the faces in the crowd. She saw elderly women who reminded her of her grandmother, young mothers holding babies, teenagers who looked up to her as a role model, and working people who had taken time from their busy lives to be there. Each face represented someone who might benefit from what she was about to share. The first words came out softly, so softly that people in the back had to strain to hear. Catherine began by thanking everyone for coming and for their patience during her absence from public life. Her voice was gentle but clear, and there was a vulnerability in her tone that was completely different from the polished speeches people were used to hearing from royal family members. Then Catherine did something that shocked everyone present. She stepped away from the formal podium and moved closer to the crowd, speaking without notes or prepared remarks. She began to tell her story in simple, honest words that came straight from her heart. She talked about waking up one morning and not being able to breathe, about feeling like the walls were closing in around her, about being afraid to leave her room because she might have a panic attack in public. Sarah Mitchell, the royal correspondent, felt tears beginning to form in her eyes as she listened to Catherine's words. In 20 years of covering the royal family, she had never heard such raw honesty from any member of the monarchy. Catherine was not just sharing information about her condition. She was opening her heart and showing the world that even princesses could feel scared and overwhelmed. The crowd began to respond in ways that surprised everyone, including the security team. Instead of the usual polite applause that followed royal speeches, people were nodding their heads in understanding, wiping tears from their eyes and reaching out to comfort strangers standing next to them. Catherine's honesty was creating connections between people who had never met, but who shared similar struggles. Catherine spoke about the shame she had felt, about believing that her anxiety made her weak or unsuitable for royal duties. She described lying awake at night, worrying that she was disappointing everyone who looked up to her. Her voice broke slightly as she talked about the impact her struggles had on her children, who had seen their mother's pain even though she had tried to hide it from them. Dr. Rebecca Walsh stood at the edge of the crowd, listening with professional interest and personal emotion. As a psychiatrist who specialized in anxiety disorders, she recognized the courage it took for Catherine to speak so openly about her experiences. The princess was describing symptoms and feelings that millions of people around the world could relate to, but few had ever heard discussed so honestly by someone in such a prominent position. William watched his wife with pride and protectiveness, ready to step in if she needed support, but allowing her to tell her story in her own way. He could see the effect her words were having on the crowd, the way people were leaning forward to catch every word, the way faces were lighting up with recognition and understanding. His wife was not just sharing her struggle. She was helping other people feel less alone in theirs. The most powerful moment came when Catherine talked about the morning she had decided to seek help. She described sitting with her children at breakfast, trying to pretend everything was normal, while inside she felt like she was falling apart. Prince Louis had asked her why she looked so sad, and in that moment, she realized that hiding her struggles was not protecting her family. It was teaching her children that it was not okay to ask for help when they needed it. Catherine's voice grew stronger as she continued speaking. She talked about working with doctors and therapists, about learning that anxiety was not a character flaw but a medical condition that could be treated. She spoke about the importance of talking to trusted friends and family members, about not suffering in silence, and about the relief that came from finally admitting that she needed help. A young woman named Lisa Parker stood in the crowd with tears streaming down her face. She had been struggling with panic attacks for months, but had been too ashamed to tell anyone, including her own family. Hearing Catherine describe exactly what she had been experiencing made her feel like she was not alone or crazy. For the first time in months, she felt hope that things could get better. As Catherine continued speaking, something magical began to happen in the crowd. People started talking quietly to those around them, sharing their own experiences with mental health struggles. Strangers were hugging each other, offering support and understanding. The formal atmosphere of a royal event was transforming into something more like a community gathering focused on healing and connection. Catherine concluded her speech by thanking everyone for their patience and support during her difficult time. She promised to continue her royal duties, but also to continue speaking openly about mental health. She wanted people to know that seeking help was not a sign of weakness, but a sign of wisdom and self-care. As she stepped back from the microphone, the crowd erupted not in polite applause, but in heartfelt cheers and expressions of love and support that echoed through the streets of London. The applause that followed Catherine's speech was unlike anything anyone had ever witnessed at a royal event. It started as scattered clapping from the front of the crowd, but within seconds it grew into something much more powerful. People were not just clapping their hands. They were cheering, crying, and calling out words of encouragement and love. The sound echoed off the hospital buildings and seemed to fill the entire neighborhood with warmth and emotion. But then something extraordinary happened that would be remembered for years to come. A small girl, no more than 8 years old, somehow slipped past the security barriers. Her name was Emma Thompson, and she had been standing with her mother near the back of the crowd. Emma had been listening to every word Catherine said, and something about the princess's honesty had touched her young heart in a way that moved her to action. Emma ran toward Catherine with a piece of paper clutched tightly in her small hand. Security guards immediately moved to intercept her, their training telling them to protect the royal couple from any unexpected approach. But William, seeing the child's innocent face in the paper she was carrying, raised his hand to signal the guards to stop. He had a feeling that this moment was meant to happen. Catherine knelt down to Emma's level, her blue dress pooling around her on the pavement. She was no longer a princess in that moment, but simply a woman meeting a child who needed to be heard. Emma's eyes were wide with a mixture of nervousness and determination as she handed Catherine the folded piece of paper. Her small voice trembled as she spoke, but her words were clear and heartfelt. Emma told Catherine that she had drawn her a picture because she wanted the princess to know that she was not alone. The little girl explained that her own mother had been very sad and worried for a long time, just like Catherine had described. Emma had been scared and confused, not understanding why her mother cried so much or why she sometimes could not get out of bed. But hearing Catherine's speech had helped her understand that her mother was not broken or bad. She was just sick in a way that could not be seen. Catherine unfolded the paper with gentle hands, and what she saw made her breath catch in her throat. Emma had drawn a picture of two women standing together under a rainbow. One figure was tall with long dark hair like Catherine, and the other was shorter with blonde hair like Emma's mother. Above the rainbow, Emma had written in careful child's handwriting the words, "You are brave and you help people feel better." Tears began flowing down Catherine's cheeks as she looked at the drawing. She asked Emma what her mother's name was, and the little girl proudly said her mother was called Sarah, and that she was the best mother in the world, even when she felt sad. Catherine asked Emma to give her mother a message. She wanted Sarah to know that seeking help was the bravest thing a mother could do, and that taking care of herself was actually taking care of her daughter too. The crowd watched this interaction with growing emotion. Many people were openly crying as they witnessed the connection between the princess and the little girl. Photographers captured the moment, but their cameras seemed less important than simply being present for something so pure and meaningful. The barriers between royalty and ordinary people seemed to disappear completely in that moment of shared humanity. Emma's mother, Sarah Johnson, had been watching from the back of the crowd in amazement as her shy daughter approached the princess. Sarah had been struggling with depression and anxiety for 2 years following her divorce, and she had brought Emma to see Catherine speak because she thought it might help them both understand that they were not alone in their struggles. She never expected her daughter to become part of the story. When Emma returned to her mother's side, she was glowing with excitement and pride. She told her mother about her conversation with Catherine and repeated the princess's message word for word. Sarah felt a weight lifting from her shoulders as she realized that her struggle with mental health did not make her a bad mother. Catherine's openness and Emma's innocent wisdom had given her permission to forgive herself and seek the help she needed. As Catherine and William prepared to leave, more people in the crowd began sharing their own stories. A teenage boy named Marcus stepped forward and called out that his father had depression, but had never talked about it until today. An elderly woman named Mrs. Chun said that Catherine's courage had inspired her to finally tell her family about her anxiety, attacks that she had been hiding for years. The impact of Catherine's speech spread far beyond the hospital courtyard. That day, within hours, mental health helplines across the country reported a massive increase in calls from people seeking support. The Samaritans organization said they received more calls in the 24 hours following Catherine's speech than they typically received in an entire week. Most callers said they had been inspired by the princess's bravery to finally reach out for help. Social media platforms were flooded with messages of support and gratitude. The hashtag Catherine Courage began trending worldwide as people shared their own mental health stories and thanked the princess for her honesty. Mental health organizations praised Catherine for using her platform to reduce stigma and encourage people to seek treatment. Medical professionals called her speech a breakthrough moment for mental health awareness. Schools across the country began receiving requests from parents asking for better mental health support for their children. Teachers reported that students were talking more openly about their feelings and asking for help when they felt overwhelmed. Emma's drawing of Catherine became a symbol of hope, with copies being shared online and printed in newspapers around the world. In the weeks that followed, Catherine received thousands of letters from people thanking her for her courage. Many writers shared their own struggles with anxiety and depression, telling her how her words had given them hope and strength. Parents wrote to thank her for helping them understand their children's mental health struggles. Young people wrote to say that seeing the princess admit to having panic attacks had made them feel less alone and ashamed. The royal family's approach to mental health advocacy was forever changed by Catherine's brave decision to speak openly about her struggles. Prince William began working more closely with mental health charities, and the couple's 3 children grew up understanding that talking about feelings and seeking help was normal and healthy. Catherine continued to speak publicly about mental health, always emphasizing that recovery was possible and that no one had to suffer in silence. Dr. Holmes later said that Catherine's public speaking about her anxiety had been more therapeutic than months of private treatment. The act of helping others had given Catherine a sense of purpose that contributed significantly to her own healing. The princess had discovered that vulnerability was not weakness, but rather a source of strength that could help heal not just herself but countless others. Years later, Emma Thompson would often tell people about the day she met Princess Catherine. She would show them the thank you letter she received from the palace, which included a photograph of Catherine holding Emma's drawing. Emma grew up to become a counselor who helped other children understand and cope with their parents' mental health struggles, always remembering the lesson she learned that day about the power of kindness and connection. The moment Catherine knelt down to receive Emma's drawing became one of the most beloved images in royal history, not because it showed wealth or ceremony, but because it captured something much more precious. It showed two human beings connecting through honesty, compassion, and hope, proving that the most powerful thing anyone can do is simply tell the truth about their struggles and help others feel less alone in the world.